Good evening. So Father Michael's still in Scotland. He's up north near Inverness right now, I think. And I was there in July, and it was freezing cold in July. So I can't imagine what it's like there right now. Anyway, he might freeze to death. So we've got this continuation from Jesus' Sermon on the Plain. Again, this kind of broad sermon that Jesus probably traveled around to various parts of Judea to preach. This kind of basic understanding of what he's fulfilled in the moral life, what he's trying to show us how to live the moral life. And as I mentioned last week, as Catholics, we're people that have to be both and. We can't just look and say, this is the thing that you do always, and then this is something else. We look, and Jesus is really giving just these radical ideas to the people right now that are so contrary to what most people of the time would have held to believe to be true, right? When he says, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, that's just a crazy idea to these people. They've never heard anybody like that before. And perhaps we hear those words. We hear, love our enemies. Okay, that's what Jesus said. Love my enemies. I know I'm supposed to do that. But slow down and think, do we actually love our enemies? Probably not. Probably not. If we think about who our enemies are, whether it's, that one person, whether it's enemies of our country, whether it's enemies of our way of life, we think and we're like, how do I, gosh, Jesus, that's a tough one. How do I love my enemy? It's interesting, non-Catholics say, that's a crazy, saying that Jesus said, eat my flesh and drink my blood. How could you guys possibly, because he said it and he's Jesus, and so if he can change bread and wine into his body and blood, then that's what he's going to do. But I find it much harder when he says, love those who hate you. Do good to those who do bad to you. If a person strikes you on the cheek, offer the other one as well. Now, does Jesus want us to be doormats? I don't think so. He wants us to go out into the world and to proclaim the good news. He wants us to go out into the world and to show by our own suffering, by our own sacrifice, that he is the way, the truth, and the life. Does that mean that we can't defend ourselves? No. The Christian moral life is one that is very difficult because it seems very at odds with the world. In many ways, it's contradictory to what culture and society tell us. Jesus says, if you love people that love you, that's a big deal, right? Even sinners can do that. Even sinners love the people that love them. Jesus is coming and he's showing them how to love. He's saying, I love all of you, even the Romans, even the Sanhedrin. I love them too. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm telling them these hard things, because I love them. They don't understand. They hate me for it. They're going to kill me for it. But I'm telling them because I love them. And so we have to recognize that, there's things that we have to tell because we love. I've been pondering whether I'd bring this up all week, but I figure I'll take a political hand grenade and toss it out. The Catholic Church teaches that in vitro fertilization is bad. The Catholic Church doesn't teach that people who were conceived via in vitro fertilization are bad. The church doesn't teach that people who have used it are bad, but the church does say in vitro fertilization is against our morals for a couple of reasons. One, because it removes the unitive act of the couple from the act of procreation, and two, because it oftentimes ends up in many, many, many more embryos than needed being created, and then either being left to be frozen or to be destroyed at a later date. And it's one of those issues that people get really, really sensitive about because they say, well, you don't know what it's like to not have kids. I don't know what it's like to not have kids. I actually know that. But in working with couples who struggle with infertility, right, and who are so desperate to have a child, and we look around and we look at the world and we think, we live in this culture of death, and here's this medical marvel almost to be able to help people to conceive, to help people to be parents, but we have to ask ourselves, do the ends justify the means? And in the case of IVF, the church has been very clear in that no, it's not. So any legislation that goes forward to try to further that is really not something that we ought to be behind. Perhaps something that would be better is legislation that would help to make the adoption process easier, to streamline the adoption process, to make it so that it was less expensive rather than focusing on IVF. There's a lot that can be said on that, and there's a lot of writings from the popes and from the church to discuss it, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I just felt it was important that I clarify what the church's teaching is on that. If I didn't do so clearly enough, let me know after Mass so I can adjust for tomorrow. But it's important that we recognize that as Christians we're countercultural, right? We look and we say, yeah, I know the world says that this is the thing that they want to do, but here's why we can't. I know the church, I know the world wants to focus on kind of my own earthly pleasure, but we need to focus on heaven. I know that the church wants, or that the world wants me to focus on what I can do for me, what I can get for me, how I can make my life here better, but the church says, no, embrace a little bit of suffering. Right? Lay down your life, just like Jesus did. Then we continue to the end, and we've got one of probably the most oft misquoted lines of Scripture. Stop judging, and you will not be judged. Stop condemning, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. That's not relativism, right? That's not just like, okay, you have your truth, and I have my truth. That's not saying if something's wrong, don't say that's wrong. Rather, what Jesus is saying is, you don't know what I'm going to do. You don't know my mercy. You don't know how I will judge this person on the final day. It's not for you to look and to say, this person is definitively going to hell. We can't say that because we can't fathom the depths of the mercy of God. But we can look and we can say, that action is going to lead you to hell. That action is something that is going to lead you to condemnation. That's something that is hurting you here and now. It's hurting others around you. That's something that you ought not do. And the church is often the one who kind of cries out and says, ooh, maybe not a good idea. Maybe not the best thing that we could do. And when we hear that, sometimes we get a little upset because perhaps that thing is something that touches close to home for me. And we hear the church say, no, that's not good, right? Contraception's not good because it opposes conception. Abortion's not good because it destroys innocent human life. Completely ignoring the poor around us and just saying, oh, not good because Jesus says, care for the poor, care for the immigrant, care for the widow, care for the orphan. How we do that, there's room for debate and disagreement on that. But these matters of life, there's no room for debate. There's no way that we can say, well, maybe for you it's not okay, but for me it is okay. And so we're called to judge actions. Sometimes that's not fun, right? When we have to tell somebody, hey, actually what you're doing is wrong. We'd rather just kind of like look the other way and not have to deal with the confrontation and just sort of think, meh. But out of love, we know sometimes we have to go to people. Now, we're not as righteous as Jesus, so I would caution you against, going up to a group of people that are doing something that you know to be contrary to the moral law and calling them a brood of vipers or flipping over tables. Probably not something that you need to start with, but there was certainly a place for that with Jesus, and there may be a place for that with us as well when sometimes somebody really needs to get something through to them. But the message that Jesus is putting forth here again in this sermon is that he's saying, I need you to live according to me. I need you to live according to me. I need you to trust in me. Now, keep in mind, these people are Jews who are living in land that's occupied by the Romans, who are corrupt, who extort them, who bring about their fellow Jews to charge taxes on them, and they charge more than they ought. They live in a lot of conflict. And Jesus is saying, love your enemies. Last couple weeks, I've had a handful of people asking, what's going on with the U.S. bishops and the letter from Pope Francis to the U.S. bishops, and and where is church and state getting crossed over, and how come there are interventions here, but there weren't interventions in other places, and just like, and I feel like people are forgetting that Jesus is the center. I feel like people are forgetting that Jesus is the one that we can say, yeah, we know he's there. We know he's good. He's God. That Jesus is at the center of our lives, that Jesus is at the center of the church, that he's the heart of the church, and that we trust in him and him alone. And we look around and we say, okay, if I'm going to have more allegiance to my country than I am to Jesus, if I'm going to have more allegiance to a politician than to the church, we have to really start questioning our motives. Are we living for here, or are we living for heaven? Jesus is saying if we want to live for heaven, we got to do radical things. We got to say, love your enemy. Now again, I'm not advocating that we, I'm trying to be really careful. It's such a fine line to be a Christian. And we're constantly, people are saying, oh, Catholics do this, and they're being political liberals, and Catholics do this, and they're being political conservatives. And yeah, there's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of nuance. There's no one political party that fits the Catholic Church. We're called to do the greatest good, yeah. Called to do good and avoid evil. But at the same time, we have to be really careful when we decide to just kind of completely ignore the church. That's not a good thing if we're doing that. If we're looking to the church and we're saying, I don't like the way that the church, used government money to move around asylees. To be honest, I have some questions about that too. But I know that it's the church that Jesus Christ established, that he founded, that he instituted here on earth so that we would be able to have his presence with us always. So for all of us, it's important that we remember the words of Jesus. Love one another as I have loved you. Be willing to lay down your life for the sake of your friends. Okay. It's my favorite time of year. It's everybody's favorite time of year. After I just talked about controversial things, it is the Archbishop's Annual Appeal. I promised you if we're able to do well in our initial pledging that we will not watch the video. Don't tell the Archbishop I said that, though. So in your seat back pockets, if you've not already done so online, there are envelopes for the Archbishop's Annual Appeal, along with pins, and the ushers, I think, also are going to help to pass out some of those. As I mentioned a few weeks ago, we were a little bit behind in last year's goal, and the goal for this year has gone up from $100,000 to $120,000. I know that we just did a capital campaign, but I ask for your generosity in this because we have to pay it one way or another. So, and so many people will tell me, Father, I'm not going to give to the Archbishop's Annual Appeal because I think money from it goes to this or this. And I have to remind people that that's not tithing, right? Tithing is giving what we have freely. Tithing is saying I'm going to give to God without really asking. But as I say every year, the most important two things that the Archbishop's Annual Appeal funds are the Vocations Office, that is the formation and education of our future priests, and that is also the Metropolitan Tribunal, who helps to process marriage annulments, and as well as any marriages that are taking place outside of the diocese. So last year I tried to spare y'all being read the script in hopes that we would do well, but since we were a little under, like I said last year, I'm going to ask everybody to either grab an envelope out of the seat back pocket or the ushers, if you can pass those out to anybody who needs one. If you've already done it online, like I did on Thursday, great. You don't need to worry about filling one of these out. But if you haven't, please fill one out. So again, I mentioned our goal is $120,000 this year. Every gift is appreciated, no matter what dollar amount. Any overage up to 25% over our goal is returned to us, which is assessment-free. So remember that. That's a helpful thing. I ask that one household member complete a pledge form. If you've already donated to the annual appeal, you do not need to do so. And if you prefer to use your phone, you can take out your phone and you can scan the QR code located on the bottom of the envelope. If you're unable to give at this time, please pray for the success of the campaign. And you can always make a gift by using that QR code or visiting lifeofthechurch.com. So we'll go through. I ask, apparently, go ahead and hand out those pens. Apparently the scanners that they use are not the scanners that we used when we were kids. So no number 2 pencils. It's got to be a black pen or a blue pen. I don't know. Cheryl, does it matter what color the pen is? It just has to be a pen. Okay. It can't be a pencil, though, because, yeah. So I ask you to please print your first and last name on the first line. Please write your address clearly, especially if it may have changed. And I ask you to please print your city, state, and zip code. Next, print your primary email and telephone number. You can make a pledge today or a one-time gift with cash or check. Under number 2 for total pledge, write your total pledge, and if you're including a one-time gift, write that on the line to the right. Also indicate the schedule of the frequency that you'd like to make your gift payments. And then if you have enclosed cash or a check, please check that box. Okay, and then when you have finished that, if you'll tear off the inner piece and place it in the envelope, please don't put the pin in the envelope, just the slip of paper, and you can drop it in either of the collections as they go by. So thank you for your support in this, and thank you for just being good Catholics that want to love Jesus and want to go to heaven. That means a lot to me as your pastor.